Hello, it's This Now from the dotNYC show, episode 2. I'm here with Jeanne Brooks, who's going to teach us how to host a hackathon. And I'm so pleased that you're here, Jeanne. And it's just today on the show, on the Ready Demo Launch show, we had someone from a team from the Princeton Hackathon who solved the problem in 36 hours that everybody's currently trying to solve, which is how to combat fake news on Facebook. And if they can do that in 36 hours, like what else could we do? And what else are we missing? And how do we host our own hackathons? And how do we do that here?
Wow, exciting. That's great. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
It's great. So I wanted to get started with what is a hackathon and then how to host one. So the definition of a hackathon, according to Wikipedia, is an event typically lasting several days in which a large number of people meet to engage in collaborative computer programming. What does that even mean? For those of you that have been to one, sometimes they look a little bit like this. You feel like you're in this, it's a bunch of, I'll say it, white dudes, white hackers who are in a basement working through the night, like hacking on their computer. In reality, I think that hackathons can look a lot more like this. This is a selfie from a hackathon that I hosted called Hacking Journalism. And really what I think hackathons are great for is they're creative problem-solving events. And they're meant to connect, create, and collaborate. So I think, where do you get started when you're trying to determine, I want to host a hackathon, what do I do? So what's the big concept? What are you trying to solve, and who are you solving with, which is an important thing to think about. I think that there are lots of different ways that we can go about solving problems, and I think the Princeton example is a really, it's a unique example, right? I think infrequently are we building revolutionary new technologies in 36 hours, but that what we want to be doing is bringing together different types of people to think collaboratively about how we might solve some problems and create a base for moving forward. So I imagine, or I hope that they were talking about earlier, using that 36 hours as a starting point, but that actually to fully develop that technology, they're going to go out and get user feedback and continue to iterate on that problem. So, I think we use them to solve problems. We use them to bring different people together to work across industries. So for example, the Hacking Journalism Hackathon was really, when we organized that, we were putting together people to rethink how media gets created. And that meant that we were fostering an environment that was the newsroom. We were creating an environment that was simulating the newsrooms of the future and giving people a sandbox to be creating in that space. So for us, we weren't necessarily trying to have a finished product, but more the experience of building technology with different types of people, bringing different types of people to the table. So not just developers and designers, but also artists, community members, journalists, people from the business side of your industry, really, a holistic approach to how we're solving problems.
Yeah, that seems to me the biggest advantage, is that you're bringing together people who might not normally interact and the ideas that they bring.
Exactly. So I'll get into a little bit further down some ways on how we can do that instructively. So I think the next thing I want you to think about is you might not always want to host a hackathon. So if your end goal is really community building, there's some things to consider. Lauren Ellen McCann has written a great post on Medium that says, so you think you want to run a hackathon, think again. I suggest reading that. It is a terrific resource for sort of an open and collaborative design process for an event. So let's get started in terms of we know we're ready to host a hackathon.
Right. Even though you just told us maybe we shouldn't.
Maybe we shouldn't. So read her post first. You still want to host a hackathon. Here's how we get started. So 1, pick your topic. 2, find your co-organizers. determine branding for your event. So I'm going to run through these sort of top level things, and then we'll go through bit by bit some of the 101 on how you do each of these things. Okay. Find your team to co-organize. You do not think that you can do this by yourself. This is a team effort. I have hosted hackathons with teams as small as 3 people and as large as 10 people.
Really?
Yeah, and so the more the merrier, because there really can be a lot to do. Then you want to determine the branding for your event. So, just very basic things like, what are you calling it, and what does it look like on the web? How are you marketing that? You want to think about your program. So if you are still looking to do a community-focused event, maybe you want to have a keynote speaker to start the day off, or maybe you want to offer some training programs that are going to help people introduce them to new technology. Then you want to determine the size of your event, right? Are you going for 20 to 30 people gathering for a weekend, or are you looking to do something big, like 100 or 150 people? And that's going to determine the rest of your kind of organizing constraints. Then you need to find the right location, and I'll go into a little bit more about how you do that. You want to find sponsors, and then you want to collect data, APIs, or content, the kind of like meat of the event. What are people going to be working with as they're building? So, there's different timetables that you can use in order to host an event. I recommend 2 to 3 months for lead time if you're hosting a really big event, so like the 150 people. But I've also organized hackathons in as quickly as 2 weeks. One of those was actually here.
Oh, really?
It was the Rise Up Hackathon with Fusion, and we hosted it here at CUNY. Yeah. So, I'm calling this phase 1. If you were on a 3-month timetable, I would say this is maybe your first month of work that you're sort of focused on, but you can use whatever timetable you feel comfortable with. You want to make sure your organizing team is formed. You want to get your vision and your summary of the topic out there, have your date, very basic logistic stuff, your date and location, your sponsorship packages, what are you offering to people to support the event, create that branding and get the website up, and then announce a save the date to people. So one thing that I will warn is that, particularly if you're in a major city, hackathons are happening all the time. Right. They're every weekend. There's many that are happening. So you want to make sure that the people that you want have it on their radar, and they're going to come to
your
event.
And are the same people going to all of them, or the coders? Or?
Sometimes, yeah. It's funny because I have found I've been hosting a lot of hackathons in New York, and there's a following, if you will. Some people come and they love the style of your event, or I also have just met some people, that's what they do on the weekends, is they go to hackathons. They love to build, and sometimes they love to go just to meet new people that are also interested in that same thing. But sometimes they have a project that they're working on, and they want to bring it to a space where there's new people that can offer some fresh ideas. So in your next phase, your sort of phase 2, you're looking at your outreach list and your audience targets. And this is really important because who do you want to come to your event, and who's participating, who should be represented, and who's traditionally going to come. So, right. You have those staples that are going to come every time. But if you are solving civic problems, you want community members, everyday community members who maybe don't think of themselves as technologists.
Right.
And so making sure that you are reaching out to them and inviting them to the space is really important. Designing an inclusive space for that. And I will say, I think one example, and this comes from the Fusion example, is we had this full stack developer show up, and he had a program that he was going to do, and he showed up kind of late, and he was like, well, I just thought I would hack for the day, and maybe since there's like activists and artists here or something, they could rewrite like some of my communication strategy. And I was like, okay, well, why don't you just sit down and have a conversation with some of these other people and just go through a design process? What are you trying to solve? How are you doing it? And then I left them alone. And by the end of the weekend, when they presented, he reported that he actually built a totally different platform because of the conversation that he had in the space. And all of the people around the table who had been sitting there thinking, I don't know why I'm here, I don't really belong, all felt the sense of empowerment participating because they had a valuable voice and input.
Which doesn't always happen, right?
It doesn't, no. And I think that's something that, you know, your intention as you go in creating these events is to foster that sort of inclusivity. So making sure that you are kind of expressing all skills are valued in this space, and to really take the time to have conversations to work through the design process. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So you want to look at some of the more logistic stuff, announcing your event, finalizing your sponsors, inviting speakers, collecting all of the content or the APIs, the data that you're using, and then make sure you get your programs scheduled, posted. People want to know what they're doing. They want to come in prepared, especially if they've never been to something before. You know, they like to know what to expect.
Yeah.
So the last few weeks before your event, expect that your focus is going to be on this. We tend to think, and I've seen this happen before, I've been guilty of this before, where you procrastinate and you're like, oh, this is easy, we'll just whip this all together, and then boom, this event will be wonderful.
You start 2 weeks ahead of time.
Or you start 2 weeks ahead of time, and then you don't sleep for 2 weeks. So, you know, make sure this is like all hands on deck. Everyone, you want to be having clear assignments for your team members. You want to be, you know, reaching your timeline, your deadlines, and that sort of thing.
Is there a software tool you like to use to do?
Yes, actually. And right after this, I have a list of project management tools.
Perfect.
Yeah, because we've, and, you know, not all of them work for everyone, but it's worth it to have some structure to what you're doing.
Yeah.
I have also found with organizing that we have had regular meeting schedules. So generally, the first couple of weeks we will have, maybe we'll meet once a week, but then in the home stretch, I would say we're meeting 2 to 3 times a week, and the primary organizers are communicating regularly throughout pretty much every day. I like to use Slack. I think that's a great tool to communicate with both the team but also with the participants. And so that really allows for you to have control over when and where and who you're talking to. So, you know, going through, you just want to kind of check all of your boxes. You want to make sure you're communicating with participants. What should they expect? What do they need to bring? What time do they need to be there? Are all of your speakers and trainers confirmed, and are they announced? Do you have a party planned or team building experiences wrapped into the event, and do you have everything you need in order for that to happen? Are you lining up any multimedia coverage or support? So is there a video or a live stream of the presentations? You know, that tends to be for more bigger types of events, like fancier events that you might want to be broadcasting this stuff. But generally, you know, you don't need to do that kind of thing. You can just gather people together to build things, and it doesn't always have to broadcast to the world.
Right. Well, maybe it does. No,
maybe it does, yeah. You want to order your food, and you do that last minute because you do that based on how many people you have attending.
Right.
You buy your supplies, and then you organize the teams that are participating. So that might be a little bit confusing for you. I think there's 2 different types of hackathons that I've seen. Some are when people apply, and they are they apply with a specific idea in mind. They're like, we're going to come. So, for example, earlier in November, I hosted this event called Emojicon that was a festival for all things emoji. And it was a lot of fun, but it was also a very serious discussion. And it was organized in collaboration with the Unicode Consortium. And so we were talking about new emoji proposals that were going to the consortium, and we had a hackathon as part of the total experience, so we called it the Emoji Studio, and people were in there building they were building emoji products, but they were also designing new emoji or just generally kind of being creative, building emoji games. And so for that one, people who came in, they had a predetermined idea. They had submitted a project that they wanted to see built over the weekend. But with Hacking Journalism, for example, we another hackathon that we've hosted, we wanted to just bring different people together, so we actually specified that people could not submit ideas ahead of time.
Right. I was involved in one as a participant that you submitted the project ahead of time, but then you get there and the people who are assigned to you didn't sign up for that project. So
how did that go?
I've done it twice, actually, the same organization. And one time it went well, and the other time it was just like, well, what project are we doing? And so we kind of came up with an all-new project, which was a little disappointing when I went in with a specific project. But I do think it's something to work through, is because group work, as we remember from grade school, is just so challenging in itself.
Yeah. And I think there's no right or wrong answer, but what you want to do is have a clear process as you're going in. So if you know that they're submitting projects ahead of time, great. Then make that clear and communicate that with people.
I think you're exactly right. Yeah.
And I've also done it. So Codex is another hackathon that I've hosted that was on the literary and publishing world. And we had a hybrid approach like that too. People did submit projects, but then others came without projects submitted. And the way we organized that was at the beginning of the day, we had everyone come up and give a short 10-second pitch of the projects that they were proposing. And then the teams could form that way.
That's smart, yeah.
But then we also ran a design session for people, because even after all of that process, there were still some people that were like, well, I don't know what I want to build still. And so you just want to make sure that what you're doing is you're communicating well with people, setting their expectations and offering a structure, but also be nimble, because that's the thing, is that these things are going to change, and you just have to be kind of quick on your feet and make sure that you're kind of checking in with everyone who is a participant to assure that they know what's up, and helping them. So if I were the host and I see people who are kind of floundering, or they have that grimace on their face and they don't really know, I'll go and check in with them and then try to pair them with someone who better aligns with what they want.
I feel like sometimes it's that the coders are in such demand, and then it's like, oh, wait, I signed up to work for you for free this weekend and do this project that I'm not in control of. So, it's that dance.
It really is. It really is. And sometimes you can't make everyone happy. So sometimes that means that people leave, and that's okay. But sometimes people stay and they're surprised by the results. And so that's also nice. I think going in with an open mind, I mean, it's a creative space. So there is no rigid structure to it. And kind of going in with that in mind will help you have more fun. So let's get into just a couple project management tools. Here are some that I love. Google Docs, it's so easy. We all use them. Everyone's on there. It's just a great way to sort of put your program together, collaborate with your whole team. Slack, as I talked about, which I love to use for both the team as well as participants. And I think that we've found really great success with that in terms of community building. So it gives all of the participants in your event a space and a home to not just collaborate with the team that they've joined for that weekend, but then also to maybe jump into other channels and see what other teams are working on. This is for a more collaborative approach. So if you were having a competitive hackathon where there was judging at the end and maybe a grand prize, you just might adjust the privacy settings of the Slack team. Maybe not everything would be open, and the teams would go into private groups versus public channels. But you can play around with Slack. Well, the beautiful thing about Slack is there's lots of control.
It's nice to think that people could continue to communicate too after it's over.
Yeah, and I find that happening in a lot of events when there's when people feel really excited about what they've built, they want to keep chatting about it. So GitHub is also a great platform for collaborating. It's a great place to store all the code. It also, I've used it we've posted our code of conduct in there before. I've done codes of conduct in both GitHub and then also on Slack, and had a sort of public channel for the code of conduct. I think that GitHub becomes a place where people can they can fork other repositories, or they can be able to store their code there, so others can go back and continue to learn from what they've done.
Right.
Then you want to have a sort of presentation platform of some kind, and Hackdash is one that I've been using for a long time. Challenge Post is another. This is just a platform that allows for all of the participants to upload their projects. So maybe there's a brief description of what they built over the weekend, and perhaps a link to the code, maybe a link to their GitHub. It's a way to acknowledge all of the team members. But the interfaces there are really beautiful and easy to use, and it also gives you a great sort of landing page for your event. So yeah, our Hacking Journalism Hackdash page has served as this. It's also, I love Hackdash because it's very visually forward as well. And so it offers, people upload photos or designs of what they did, and you get this kind of like visual map of all the things that got created during your event.
I have to check that out. I've never heard of it.
Yeah. And then Trello or Asana are also really good for your organizing structure in terms of like task tracking and assignments. It's just a great like community platform for everyone to kind of see like, I'm assigned to do this, and here's my deadline, and you can kind of check it off once it's done, that sort of thing.
So are you still using several of these at once, or when you're hosting a hackathon? Yeah,
I'm using all of them, although I don't use Trello or Asana as much. Because they're a little bit more efficient. I mean, they're more professional tools, I think, than you're as an organizer of a hackathon, it can be kind of loose, and there's other ways to sort of track, like, I use Google Docs a lot for the project management, so I tend to build we've built spreadsheets that have all of those tracking and assignments in there. But others, and particularly a lot of people in the technology industry, have a preference of Trello or Asana. So I offer it for those people. Yeah. It's not for me. So some of the specifics that you might not think about when you're thinking about a location. Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is your number one priority.
Yes.
And sometimes it can be cute when you don't have enough Wi-Fi, and you're like, well, that's the problem you're hacking, is how do you build these things without internet? But really, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, really not.
No. And you want to make sure, when people come in to work on a hackathon, they're gonna use a lot of bandwidth. So make sure that you understand not just, is there Wi-Fi, but what kind of bandwidth are you working with? How many people can you get on the network? What are the constraints of the Wi-Fi that you have? That is gonna be really important. That might even constrain some of your design around how many people you bring, how big your event is. And then just the basics. You want tables and chairs for people to sit. You want plenty of electrical outlets. That's another big one to not forget. People are going to come with like 10 different devices, and they want to plug all of them in at once. So make sure that you have that. And then it's nice, some of these extras are AV system is preferred. So if you're having speakers, you don't always have to have that, but I went to the Tech Lady Hackathon in DC in October, and I spoke at that event, and they had a keynote speaker, and that had AV and a stage, but then all of the trainings were just in little rooms, and there was little AV required. So just know, like, what are you trying to do with the program that you're developing? How are you trying to showcase? Are you going to have presentations at the end? And do you have all the equipment you need in order to run that? Or do you need to rent it? Or, does the location that you're going to have it, or do you need to rent it and bring it in? And then just, this is something that we don't always think about, and I've been caught without this, which is why I add it, which is access to the space for prep. So making sure that you can either get in the day before or that you can get in there many hours before, because you want to be able to set up all the tables and the registration booth and all of that. And oftentimes when you're looking at costs, there's extra cost to that if you're renting a space. And so these are just things to think about as you're kind of speccing out all of your budgets.
Things you learn the hard way, right?
Yes, exactly. I think I had a recent event where we did not have the full access that we needed in order to prep, and it ended up being kind of a zoo, and then we were not fully, it was like people were entering the space and stuff was still everywhere, and you don't want that. So I think I put this first and foremost because I think maintaining a safe environment, particularly always. I think you want to have a code of conduct no matter what. Particularly in the technology industry, the reality is that there is a lot of harassment or discrimination, and I know we don't really like to talk about that, but I think we all want to be developing safe spaces, and I do not recommend hosting an event without one. I think they are crucial to any event organizing. So there's a couple of resources, and they're easy to put together. The Geek Feminism blog has a how-to, and you literally can just copy and paste their anti-harassment policy, and it's perfect.
I wouldn't have thought of doing that.
Yeah, I think it's important, and you want to have a process around that. So all of those resources there, and honestly, if you just Google how-to code of conduct, there's a ton of resources, and a lot of them are open source, so you can or Creative Commons, so you can just copy and use them yourself. So with this inclusivity and thinking about the ways that you want to bring all the right people to the table, who you're reaching out to, again, so are you reaching out to not just the technologists, but also the diverse skill set? And so you want to have some kind of application or registration page. I never like to do just a registration sign up because I want to know some things about people before they walk in the door. Even if they're coming in and they are saying whatever, and they're building whatever they want, you still want to know something about them before they come in. So I have a sample hackathon form for you, and you can go to that bit.ly link.
Oh, thank you.
Our hacking journalism team put this together because we've done it so many times. There's no right or wrong answer, but you could take this and then edit it to your preferences. This one is specific to, we use this for the hacking journalism one, so you'll see some of the selections on that page are like, are you a developer, a designer, a journalist, an editor, that sort of thing. And so whatever theme your hackathon is, you can make those adjustments. I think some critical things to think about are not just the skills, but also just some general interests. That's going to give you a little bit, like what's your favorite food or what inspires you about this event. Just like something that gives you a little bit more about who's showing up. You can really make your experience better. So building inclusive teams, when you're thinking about who you want at the table in each of these teams, you want different technology skills. So, with your developers, do you have front end and back end developers? Do you have a designer? But then, do you have the writers and the, whatever your theme might be? Who are all of the other people, and are each of them represented on that team and as diverse a team as possible? Then you want to kind of look at is the gender and race makeup of the team, is that diverse? And sometimes I even put quotas. So for example, NASA Space Apps Next Gen, which was a high school level hackathon that I advised, it was organized by high school students, but I was their advisor. And when they approached me to organize it, I said, I'd be happy to do this with you, but it has to be an inclusive design, which means that you have to strive to have 50% girls participating. And they didn't announce that publicly, but as they were accepting applications, they made sure they did outreach, they recruited to make sure that they had enough girls, and then they were successful. They had more than 50% girls participate. Right. So I think, I encourage you to also set those intentions and maybe even set quotas. Not that you need to do that outwardly, but internally set goals to make sure that that happens for both race, gender, age, skill, and then your mix of expertise. So,
right.
And that is not just, are you talking to the technologists and the developers, but what is the core of the expertise that you're trying to solve for? And who are the different people that you need to be bringing in for that? And then the type of organization. So for me, when I was thinking about that, it was with journalism groups, did we have both mainstream and public media and independent, that sort of thing. And then these are like in that application when you were asking them questions about what their interests were, it's like, can you find commonalities between people that might connect them and just have better team dynamics? And so those little clues help you to sort of put that all together. And then you just do a final review of each of the teams to kind of make sure. And so whether that's on the ground on the day of the event or whether, you're building the teams ahead of time, you just are like checking all of that off.
And what have you preferred, organizing the teams ahead of time or...
I have no preference. I like doing both. I've had success with both. But again, you just have to communicate ahead of time what you're trying to do. So I think if it's an inclusive design and you're working in an industry that is not where you're trying to break some of those barriers, I would opt to design the teams yourself so that you assure that diversity, because people go with who they know, they go with their friends, but these events are really about bringing different people together.
Right.
So then, just going into the day, prepared a sample supply list, things that you might want to have as you're going in, signage for the event, name tags so people know, power strips so you have all of the electricity you need, thumb drives for people so they can be sharing presentations or data, notebooks, Post-its, markers, pens, poster boards, like any of these sorts of supplies. You think you're just going to go and have be on a computer, but actually a lot of this happens analog. You're drawing, you're creating, maybe your end product is a paper prototype and it's not anything on the computer. And a lot of times, some of our best results have actually come from that. So you want to have all of those fun supplies. And then candy, because you need that sugar high. Obviously, of course, you're going to keep your participants fed throughout the event, but candy's just like a fun way to keep them motivated. And then games or toys to keep the mood light. So you've gotten through your event, everyone has presented, they're excited, but there's just a couple of things that you're not quite done, right? Is that after the event, you want to thank everyone. It's very basic, but it's something that we often forget about. You want to thank your hosts and your speakers, but you also, and your sponsors, of course, so that they sponsor your next event. But then you want to thank your entire organizing team and all of the participants. And I recommend a survey for participants so that you get feedback for your next one. And then you take off and go have a party with everyone so that they can put their computers down and just get to know each other, and whether that is just like offering space at the end of the event for them to have a conversation. It can be, whether it's like hang out here in the space that we've been at, or, go to a park or a bar or something and just relax and chat.
So, taking from your notes, thank you so much for being here. Thank you in the control room. And where's the party?
Right outside.
All right. See y'all next time.
Thanks.